So let's see, we got, yeah, I don't see Kelly or Jane.
Started with member updates and wait for them to join. And then I guess until we reached quorum, we could do we could approve the minutes at the end of the meeting if we needed to do that.
Yeah, yeah, so what do we have to, what's our quorum? How many we have to have?
We need 5.
5. Well, did you hear from Kelly? She's usually pretty good about coming.
She accepted, and I believe she's coming today.
Okay. Well, we can get going. We can get the ball rolling here. I tell you, the person I want to hear from and what they're doing is Mauricio.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I am speaking to you today from Valencia in Spain. It's been a full day. We've been here for about a month already, and it's been wonderful, of course. Just yesterday, we got an opportunity to go and see a British museum exhibit of mummies that is making the rounds here on the on the City of Arts and Sciences in Valencia. And it's just out of this world. And one of the most interesting things that I saw is that it's just, this is an exhibit that showcases what our life as humans was like 2,000 plus years ago. And while there are some really interesting things about how far we've come, it's also really interesting how much of it is still the same and how much we tend to go in circles. Lessons that we thought we've learned long ago, we seem to need to learn them all over again. And I see that in today's society. So it was really interesting in terms of the work that we do, just to every generation, every stage in history requires for a group of us to remember, folks, what's important, what we need to protect. And more so now that we're so many more and we have such an influence in the natural world around us, the work that we do here is that much more important. So very proud to be here. And hello to everybody.
Thank you, Mauricio. I can't wait to get there. Maybe I'll go to the same exhibit. So, Reva, tell us about you. What's going on with you?
So actually I am, I'm currently in Nevada traveling, but running the meeting from here. And again, sorry if anybody was stuck in the lobby. I think we're having a little bit of lobby admitting issues with Teams today, so sorry about that. I think a few of you got stuck in the lobby. So I'll talk about this a little bit more in the meeting later, but I just went to a conference last week, a few days ago, where I was representing OCRF and did a few presentations for the program and interacted with a bunch of folks at the Outdoor Recreation Summit. So I'll tell you more about that, but it went really well, and I think we did some really good outreach to diversify our applicants.
I'm glad to hear you're traveling. Murat, how are you doing? Did you ever get your hip fixed?
Yep, I'm on day 6 after surgery, so I'm pretty high on extra strength Tylenol, and I'm doing fine. It's been an interesting month, and just really impressed me again on people that work in the medical field, how kind they are and how resilient they are and how skilled they are, and what they can do for people to really help change their quality of life. So I've been very impressed with that. And in the meantime, I also had a great visit from Mark Stern and Jenny. They came over and had breakfast with me, and then we went and had a little tour of Land Trust property over to Camp Polk, which they'd never been to, and I think they went to Indian Ford Preserve afterwards. So just trying to introduce them to one of our partners' work, and that was super fun. And they're both so nice, as you all know. So anyway, not much else.
Well, you look great. You don't look like you went through a horrible surgery, and we live in amazing times that we can do those things and be sitting here in a meeting 6 days later. Back in the day, you were in the hospital for 2 weeks after a total hip replacement. Now they boot you out the same day sometimes. Pretty amazing. Science marches on.
Well, I felt lucky. I went to Staten, to Santiam Hospital, which is a small hospital in the valley. They could just get me in a lot quicker, and they had a really good surgeon there. And they actually let you spend the night in the hospital. So in Bend, they just boot you out as soon as your spinal wears off, and you're on your own. So I felt very pampered to have a night in the hospital. So yay! But, yeah.
Yeah, that always made me very nervous to let people go home that same day. A lot of things can happen that first night, so it's always good to keep an eye on you.
Yeah.
Hey, Jane, how are things?
They are fine. I got a new computer since the last meeting, and this is the first Zoom meeting I've had on it, and I'm impressed. Everybody looks better, including me. So that's fun. But yeah, everything is just dandy here. The fall colors are spectacular. And the fall rain is getting tiresome already. Other than that, things are good.
Great. I see Mark Stern is here. Man, people are going out of their way. We got Mauricio from Spain. We got Mark Stern from Los Angeles. We got Riva from Nevada. That's just awesome. How are you doing, Mark?
Doing good. It's sunny and warm and really pleasant here in Southern California, which is not a place I'd really spent much time in before. But I have to say, like Jane mentioned, even a week of rain, all of a sudden it felt way too familiar.
Yeah.
But the rain's good, but it's pleasant down here for sure. There's a few people here I've noticed.
Yeah, I bet.
A few cars, to be for sure.
Yeah, well, great, Mark. Thank you for taking the trouble to join us. Really appreciate your input on all this. Kelly, how's the coast?
Hey, everybody. Coast is good. It's really rainy. We're getting some thunder and lightning, which I always love. That's one thing I miss from the Midwest. So it's nice to get a little taste of those thunderstorms. And I was out sampling the ocean this morning, which was big and magnificent. And there was actually a little, what do you call it? Like a spout, like a rain spout that came down over the Rogue Reef while I was out there. It was amazing. Kind of spouted down onto the reef. I thought, oh, I wonder how the seals and sea lions are doing today. But yeah, everything's great here. We're just getting out. We're in some design and planning phase for a lot of projects. We'll be getting into tree planting soon, which I always love. Yeah, life's good. I'm happy. We painted my house yellow, so I'm just even happier. I love bright colors. So excited.
Kelly, I love hearing your stories of the coast. There's always something cool going on. I don't have to worry about sea lions and seals here in Klamath Falls. Liza Jane, what are you worried about in Wallowa?
I have no worries, no worries. But I did get to go. OWEB had our meeting in the Klamath. Did you talk about that, Carl, yet?
No, I didn't mention.
No, it was great. We got to tour the J.C. Boyle Dam before it blows up, which was really exciting. And hearing about these 4 dams that are going to come out, huge project, and I just see it as so much opportunity to learn what happens when you do this. How do we restore it? Lots of mistakes will be made that we can learn from, but it's really exciting. It's been a long time coming, so that was great. And then got to go out the last day. Those of us that kind of got snowed in there into the Klamath, got to go visit Carl's place and see this wetland project that, Carl, you were right. Like, we need to do that everywhere down there. That is so exciting. I was so inspired and love to see it kind of when we get out of the way of nature, how she can just do such great things if we just get out of the way. And that's how I saw that project with your leadership. But really cool to see that. That was special. And then I drove home the long way to stay away from that storm. So I went through country I really hadn't seen before. I love that big, open, lonesome country, and woke up to snow on the ground in the morning. So my timing was just right. And we're soggy, and it's good. Everything's doing good here.
Have you got snow?
In the mountains, yes, but not down here. It's still pretty warm. So it's just around the corner, though.
Well, thanks, Liza Jane. I really liked having you out at the farm. It's fun to show that place to people and see what's going on. And so for me, the great thing for me is all the socialization I'm getting to do with OCRF people. I saw Mark Labhart. I saw Liza Jane. I'm going to Portland Wednesday, and I'm staying with Jane. Then I'm flying to Spain and hanging out with Mauricio. So basically, my social life is wrapped up in the OCRF, which I can't think of a better group of people to be hanging out with. So I'm excited about all of that. So it's been a great fall here, and looking forward to this meeting. I think I covered everybody that's here. We're missing Mark Labhart, and we thought we were going to miss Mark and Mauricio, but they're here, so we are in great shape. So, all right, so let's move on. You want to go ahead, and we got a quorum now, so we could do the minutes.
We have more than a quorum. Thank you, everybody, for joining while you're traveling. I was worried about the quorum, but we don't have to worry about that.
Oh, don't we have to say some folks that are here, the guests?
Yeah. So thank you to the members. I see we have a few members of the public that have joined us today. We have Frank Heibel from Forest Park Conservancy. Thanks so much for joining. We have Mike Tody, Oregon Hunters Association, Tim Gresseth with Oregon Wildlife Foundation, Dennis White, and like quite a few
I'm with
folks.
Friends of Otter Rock, actually.
Oh, thank you, Dennis. And we have Dasha Forster. She's going to be presenting as our guest presenter today. And we have a Courtney Johnson. Actually, this is quite a full house. This is the most members of the public we've had join in quite a while. So thanks everyone for joining. Sorry if I missed you. Let's see. James Frazier, Emily Hamblin. And I think that does it. Thanks, everybody.
I do want to point out, we have Tim Gresseth and Mike Tody here. Hope you all took a look at that video of the Gilcrest crossing. If you didn't, go find it. I think Reva sent it out to everybody. What an awesome video. It's a video about that crossing that we helped fund. I think it's one of the projects I'm most happy we got involved with, but it's a really powerful video, and both Mike and Tim are featured in it, and they do a fantastic job telling the story. And I hope a lot of people get to look at that. It's just a really powerful message. And so I just wanted to point that out with both of them here, how impressed I was with that. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the minutes and get some things done. So anyone want to make a motion on the minutes?
Happy to go for it if you want. I move to approve the October 2nd, 2020 meeting with minutes with the continued authority to correct spelling, grammar, and punctuation.
Do we have a second?
I would second that.
Kelly seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Looks we're good. We're good to go on that one. Great. So Reva, I don't have my agenda up, so I'm going to count on you to let me know what's
Yeah,
next.
no problem. So next is actually, I'm up next, and I'm going to be doing some OCRF program updates. And just a heads up for everyone, I do apologize if anything goes haywire. I and myself and a few other people at our agency have been having troubles with screen sharing through Teams, and I hope it doesn't boot me out. But I have sent the presentation to Tiffany Caldwell and Sherilyn Abbott of the Plan B, so hopefully they can bump us back up if anything gets us off course. So first of all, I'll just be going over a few program updates with everyone. So the first thing is a fondant grant software that we're currently working on. It's being built out for the OCRF program. And this is good news for us because what we're currently operating with is we've kind of outgrown the Google form application process that we have currently. And so this is just an update for the program. I'm working with Fondant staff to build out this grant software for our program so that folks will be going on to log into Fondant, and that's where they'll apply to our grants. And then, so for any members of the public that are online or watching this meeting recording later, this information will be posted to our website on how to apply through Fondant and ahead of our January 30th RFP. So for advisory committee members, this will mean that you will get you'll create an account, and it will mean a new review platform for you to use as well. And so I'll be working with you all on that and guiding you through that process. The next thing I have is some really good news about our Northern Basin and Range seat. We actually have 2 successful applications submitted. Really grateful to Kelly for her successful recruitment efforts. So thank you, Kelly. And also to Chair Wenner. Thank you, Carl, for his recruitment efforts. These resulted in 2 applications for our qualified candidate applications. So thank you, Carl and Kelly. And those are on their way.
Kelly really helped us out there and got us connected with one. And then Brent Fenty from the Oregon Desert Land Conservancy suggested a great individual who I contacted. And so we've got 2 really good applicants. It's up to the governor's office which way we go, but yeah, I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you all for your work with that. Those are on their way through the director's office to the governor's office. And so hopefully we'll have that seat filled before too long. The next thing is just a reminder that our OAR revisions will be heading to the commission for approval on December 15th. And those are still going through the processes of DOJ review and director's office review. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about today with you guys was something I talked about a little bit earlier, but did go to just a few days ago, attended the Oregon Outdoor Recreation Summit. And the organizers gave quite a bit of time on the agenda for OCRF. And so they had me I had 2 presentations over the course of 2 days. And also I was doing a tabling event that resulted in quite a bit of outreach for the program. So I had a great time there. The first presentation I did was a program overview for everybody who was in attendance. The next one was the following day where I highlighted our really great project, the Wolverine Tracking Project with Cascadia Wild. And then at the tabling event, I interacted with a lot of Oregon outdoor recreation programs, trail alliances, and yeah, hopefully ended up diversifying the pool of applicants that will end up applying to our next RFP and future RFPs.
If you, one thing there, Reva, is also, I'm sure there's some organizations that would be great to be in our coalition of support. So we should maybe review the participants there and see who we might ask to do that.
Yeah, that's a great thought. Thank you, Carl. So the next thing that I wanted to go over with is just to remind the group of our upcoming meeting schedule for the next couple meetings. And so that's our next meeting is actually going to be our final strategic planning meeting with Sherilyn Abbott, and that's on December 4th. January 8th, we will be doing our spring RFP considerations and determinations. We'll also be hearing from the OAH Council, the Ocean Acidification Hypoxia Council, the Marine Program. And on February is when we plan to have Sherilyn come back actually and do a review the final draft of the strategic plan with the committee. So those are our upcoming things to keep on your radar for our schedule.
Reva, can you, okay, this is exactly what, yeah, let's go over this timeline for the RFP.
Right. So getting this on your radar as well, our upcoming RFP is going to be opening on January 30th. So, and that's why at our January meeting, we'll be doing our final determinations for this RFP. And then the thing to remember for members of the public that are on the call is that the RFP will be open for 2 months, so 60 days. It'll open on January 30th and close on March 30th. And for advisory committee members, some dates to keep in mind for the review process is tech reviews should be completed by May 1st. And the OCRF Advisory Committee review period will be throughout the month of May. And then we'll be doing our advisory committee recommendations will be on June 10th. So we'll actually just be moving that June meeting to the following week to make that happen on June 10th. All right, any questions about this RFP schedule?
It'll be great to get back to doing that again. It feels like a long time since we did it.
Right, a long pause for our strategic planning efforts. Yep. All right, well, I'm going to pause here, and if there are no more follow-up questions on those program updates, feel free to reach out if you have anything that comes up. But we do have next on our agenda, Carl, if you're good with it, we have a project presentation from Dasha Forrester. She's going to be talking about her project, Pollinator Habitats with Green Lens.
Great, let's do it.
Hello, everyone. It's such a great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting Green Lens, and I'm really happy to represent our grassroots organization. Gotten a little bit dark outside, so I'm noticing my face is a little bit in a shade, but if it doesn't bother anybody, I think the focus is on the presentation itself. Reva, am I going to be able to share my screen? I should be already, right? I think.
You should be able to. So I just stopped sharing, and then that should allow you to jump in and share.
I'm going to go ahead and start. Okay. Sounds great.
Yep.
Okay. Everybody sees.
We got it.
Awesome.
Yeah, we can see them.
Wonderful. I'll switch to the slideshow mode. So this presentation is on the project funded by OCRF grant for the period of fall 2022, year 2023, Most of our project took place in this calendar year, apart from some planning. So I'm going to proceed to the next slide. A little bit about Greenlands as a background. We are a community-led nonprofit serving the historically underserved community of Lance in Southeast Portland, Oregon since 2012. Our mission is to cultivate a thriving, resilient, and environmentally just community through engagement, education, and collective action. Our programs are dedicated to habitat restoration and bolstering the urban ecology resilience to climate change, aligning closely with community building, engagement, and leadership for community-minded design and initiatives. This photo is from this summer. It's taken at one of our core projects, Malden Court Community Orchard, that was established in 2015. And a couple of young youth here in the white t-shirts are our summer youth interns, which were also a part of the OCRF funded project, the engagement in this particular project. Greenland's programs connect people with free resource and learning hubs, such as our tool library, garden aid, community orchard, while engaging our community in environmental restoration and stewardship, including in the Johnson Creek watershed floodplain. Most of our neighborhood is located in the watershed floodplain. This involves expanding our neighborhood green spaces, pollinator habitats, and food-bearing spaces, as well as hands-on education and our summer youth internships. So the core programs are currently pollinator habitats since 2015, Malden Court Community Orchard since 2015, Community Tool Library and Seed Library since 2012. We've added gardening aid at the onset of the pandemic because people said that that was important to them since 2020. Lance Youth Summer Internships we've hosted for 7 seasons since 2015. And the Green Ring framework is for our placemaking, wayfinding, greening lands, organizing around issues, kind of programming since 2015 that housed air quality team efforts. This year it was Green Wall at Land Elementary, where we've planted 14 additional trees and a butterfly garden. So that's one of the big ones as well. And the photo is also at the Malden Court Community Orchard earlier this year in the spring. Pollinator Habitats, the program that was partially and substantially funded by OCRF grant this year, is installation of drought-resilient native and pollinator-friendly plants and rain gardens on the residential sites. The public benefit of these has been through and is through local watershed conservation projects in Southeast Portland. Apologies for some background noise. Expanding flood-resistant green spaces, providing hands-on education and stewardship of the new and existing green spaces. The project is completed with engagement of the greater multicultural community of Lance and Southeast Portland, leadership of local BIPOC and immigrant community members, contractors, and organizations. This photo is from our 3rd planting, where we've engaged with Somali American Council of Oregon. Should I pause here? Was there a question? I'm sorry. No. I'll keep going. Project accomplishments. So by the end of the grant period, I'm happy to report on behalf of Greenlands, we are on track to planting 6 pollinator and rain gardens. 67% of these will be at the sites of our Latinx community members, adding 550 plus native pollinator and wildlife friendly plants and 5 trees to the walkways and pollinator so-called dead zones, converting 2,000 plus square feet of lawn into environmentally friendlier and community friendlier spaces, engaging 100 plus direct participants of all ages through hands-on learning and planting, with Spanish language supported 100% of our events, workshops and plantings. Other languages supported as appropriate to the particular locations and demographics of the plantings have been Ukrainian, Somali, and Russian. We had a Russian immersion school at across from one of our plantings, and I'll move to that next. These particular photos are from the a couple of plantings. One was in March and another one was completed in October, on October 28th. This slide demonstrates a little bit of how we evaluate sites and select them. For example, the first pollinator habitat planting site at this address had the owner demographic. It was a 100% BIPOC household, our Latina community members. It's in Lance neighborhood. This one was east of I-205, but our neighborhood is split in two by the interstate, so we work on both sides. Grass lawn dominated street. This site had been a few kind of measured distances to other important sites, as 0.4 miles from the rain garden and pollinator habitat that we've collaboratively established with Rose CDC and DPAVE at the Biocourt apartment complex in 2016, and continue stewarding to this day together. 0.7 miles from Lance Community Garden, 0.5 miles from the school community garden, and now our new butterfly garden at Oliver Land Elementary School, which is also on the same side of I-205. 1 mile from Kelly Elementary School garden, which is on the west side of I-205. 1.2 miles west from Zinger Farm, on the same side of I-205. This photo is from another site, so it doesn't coincide with the first one. It's for the third one, but it's kind of characteristic to what what we are observing and living in and around some of these sites. This one was done. My coworker Angelica is on this photo. We're doing canvassing among immediate neighbors, and we are kind of just scoping out the neighboring streets. A lot of them have grass lawn or grass parking strips, or often no parking strips. And also there are lots of pockets of vegetable gardeners and other community members who would benefit from connectivity of pollinator habitats in and around their neighborhood. Other sites that are not listed here are Kelly Butte, Powell Butte, huge habitat sites where insects and wildlife live and need to get to and from. The next few slides are about their planting sites. So the first one happened on March 4th at this address. It's a residential full sun partial shade lawn with no city sidewalk, high visibility corner lot, located in Lance and within the Johnson Creek watershed. We've adjusted the yard slope, dug out a rain garden swale, disconnected the downspout for the neighbor and community member, planted a diverse range of plants, including native vines, ground covers, annual, perennials, and grasses, added erosion control, and improved drainage. As a special addition for the residents and neighbors, we've added some edible plants like blueberries and strawberries, and some flowering ornamentals just for this particular site. And the street, a little bit of a snapshot behind this site, is visible. Grass lawns, mainly this particular stretch did not have sidewalk. We've evaluated carefully whether we wanted to do a residential plot, but having clearly stated the purpose of the garden to be a demo garden for the neighbors, it has already been engaging a lot of community members around it as that, and we've seen big benefit at establishing this garden on the site, on the fence line of the property owner. Planting site number 2, March 11th, we've done at this address. It's a residential parking strip, full sun to full sun, partial shade lawn with sidewalk located in Lance and within the Johnson Creek watershed. We've improved water drainage and erosion control features, added a crepe myrtle family tree, as visible in one of the photos. Added extended canopy through the tree, planted a diverse range of plants, including bulbs, sedums, native species, yarrow, aster, and more. Once again, the community engaged, plantings engaged between 12 and 20 people from the Lance community, and oftentimes the immediate communities as we do the direct outreach, and we see neighbors coming out and joining us. Planting site number 3 on October 28th, which just happened recently. residential full sun to no to full sun partial shade lawn with no sidewalk located in Palhurst Gilbert. It's very close to, it's just on the border, so east of Lens, within the Johnson Creek watershed. We installed a rain garden, detached the downspout. 4 languages were spoken at this event and supported with representation. We came together for hands-on education with Somali American Council of Oregon and planted a diverse range of native plants, including long blooming and low maintenance species. Once again, there was no sidewalk on this street. We have evaluated it carefully and decided it was worth to create a demo garden for the neighbors and the street and the benefit of public within the residential line. Planting site number 4 just happened across from Kelly Elementary School. It's a walkway to our school. It's a Russian immersion program in our neighborhood. Residential full sun to full sun partial shade parking strip, a walkway to Kelly Elementary within the Johnson Creek watershed, 82 feet by 3.5 feet. Quite a long stretch. We've installed heat-tolerant pollinator garden with low-growing selection for long sidewalk strips in full sun, including Oregon sunshine, creeping rosemary, creeping Oregon grape, sedums, and more. Added 2 trees, so we extended the canopy, and we maintained, it was made a little bit easier by the need to maintain 3 landing points for getting in and out of cars, as this is a drop-off pickup area as well for school community. We've engaged the neighboring community and the school community and have seen some participation from schools' own children, and as well as a broader diversity of neighbors. And throughout, we still have a couple more. We've already added a 5th one, and we only have the last one to go this next Saturday. So we'll be completing our 6 planting successfully on Saturday. So throughout the project, we've engaged multilingual community. The OCRF funded project leverages direct culturally specific outreach and engages our greater diverse and multicultural community of Lens and Southeast Portland, the leadership of local BIPOC and immigrant community members, contractors, and organizations. There are some photos from different plantings, including Somali community joining us to learn together, and we've received great feedback from all of the participants. This is almost the end. So the maintenance and monitoring are important aspects of this program. They are collaborative, ongoing, and are supported by Green Lens through annual hands-on maintenance workshops, connection, and free resources, such as to our tool library, where members can check in and out any gardening or home maintenance tool for free. Where we also host garden swaps and things like that, where people can continue sourcing whatever they need to maintain and store their pollinator habitats and rain gardens. So monitoring will be ongoing every summer with the help of our summer youth interns, and the impact of this year's grant is expanded flood and heat resistant pollinator habitats and land-based native green spaces in the Johnson Creek watershed. I have a small kind of a Reels video on Instagram I can share if there is time, or we can just skip to the questions and answers.
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just a 30 seconds little clip. We'll probably go through it. I'm gonna go through it cycle and come back.
It doesn't seem to be playing.
Oh, it doesn't. Oh, maybe it's not that simple as just sharing my screen then. I'm sorry, it's playing on my end. Maybe it's just not how
That's not coming through. Why don't we go to questions and answers? First of all, you answered my question. It looks great that you have a monitoring and maintenance program going on. That's a really valuable thing. And so you answered my question there, that you have it. It's great. Are there any other questions or comments for Dasha?
Dasha, this is Kelly. I was just wondering, oh, look at me. I'm so out of place here. Liza raised her hand like a good student and I just blurted out. I was wondering if you guys are seeing this around other small communities and pockets in Portland, or if you guys are able to share what you're doing with other neighborhoods, because it seems like a great idea and something that you could kind of get a little neighborhood rolling into.
Yes, definitely. We've been, even through these plantings and some greater projects like the Butterfly Garden, people come, so the majority of participants come from the immediate community or, direct outreach, but then we would get approximately one person per planting that would be kind of coming from like Growing Portland or Vassell Kitchen Gardens, I think was the latest one. It's the newer emerging organizations and the older established organizations of folks who are interested in this kind of work. Some of them are connected to Lens already, and some aren't, and are really curious about what it would, how to support this kind of efforts where they live through their work. And we've also collaborated or reached out to some even more grassroots organizations or initiatives like Pollinator Parkways in Montevilla. They've shared their very thoroughly developed, very hands-on and easy manual, which we've, with their permission, translated into Spanish and have been sharing with our community members. And we know similar projects are done by Verde, so who have been in the past. So we know there is a web, and we will continue striving to connect to more and more individuals and organizations to share our experience, and also keep an open invitation for anybody to join for our workshops and plantings.
Eliza Jane.
Thank you. And Dasha, thank you for that presentation. It's inspiring and exciting. I'm curious, just off the top of your head, with you said you got feedback from people who participated. Was there one or two things that kind of surprised you in their feedback to you, or sent you over the moon?
Oh yeah, yes, definitely. The group that joined us from the Somali American Council of Oregon shared that they just absolutely had an amazing experience, that they just had no idea about many aspects of this kind of project or what it would take to plant a garden in Oregon, which resonated deeply with myself, as I am also an immigrant from another culture, from Ukraine. And even though gardening is a part of that culture, just to be here in the new environment, new climate, new nativescapes, is I'm still learning basically, and it's truly beneficial to community members who come from different cultural and life experiences to just see. And sometimes it takes more than one event too, because it's what it takes to prepare side. Why is it important? What are the insects that benefit from this, and why are they important? Yes, another comment would be like something people would occasionally say of, yeah, and wasps or something is coming out of my soil, and I'm kind of just trying to get rid of them. So like, how does this kind of help me get rid of? And so we go through this education of, well, this is actually a little bit not what this is actually the opposite of what we are trying to striving for. The insects are, most of our pollinators live in the soil that we kind of enrich and provide, and the habitats if they're safe. And so for many people, that aspect has been very mind-blowing and interesting to them to learn. And so all of this instills this great motivation and hope in all of us that we're doing an absolute right thing by not just planting and expanding through the smaller scale solutions, if they could be assessed by square footage, but it's the impact it leaves on all of on the community members around them, and ultimately on the wildlife.
Mark Stern.
Well, Dasha, I was going to say a couple of things, but just hearing you in the last few minutes there describe the work you were doing and the energy and the passion that you brought to the project and the community was just really impressive, and really resonated and could be felt. And just and the specific projects that you shared with us, the 6 of them, are just really well put together, and it really gave us a clear idea of what you've been doing and what you've accomplished. So really impressed by all of it. I was just going to ask if you have plans going forward or thoughts on doing additional work, or if you can see funding that could be available to help continue this effort and expand it, or just where do you see it maybe going from here?
Yes, thank you so much for this question. And of course, we're also just very, very grateful for this opportunity to do the project. But yeah, Greenlands has begun the pollinator habitats in 2015, and one of the biggest one was the Malden Court Community Orchard, which continues needing sometimes the uplift of the pollinator spaces. We've done one in the spring separately from this project, just by remedying the bindweed that kind of sprouted there and adding a new pollinator habitat on top of that area through the cutouts in the weed barrier. That just so, and then in addition to that, we've done a number of collaborative rain gardens and pollinators ongoingly. Each year, I think we add between 1 to 5. Last year was just 1, but this new kind of boost of community engagement and with the help of funders kind of helped us to circle back and reestablish this program in a very new multicultural and full iteration of it that we've always striven for, and we will continue striving for making this effort ongoing by adding up to 6 pollinator habitats on our streets. So we have goals to do that annually, and by circling back to all of the sites through the workshops on maintenance and the monitoring with youth interns to continue cultivating the community and the connection of the neighbors to the knowledge and support and the tools that they might need. So
Yeah, that's great. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Dasha. Thank you for being here. And also learning that you're from Ukraine. I hope family and loved ones are safe down there.
Thank you.
I wanted to, once again, thank you for the work that you do. The Lens community is one that's close to my heart, just because I know just how amazingly diverse and the kind of just richness of in the melding of all the cultures that takes place there. That is such an important component for trying to develop community climate change resilience. And so my question for you would be, I know that it's difficult to sort of like collect all these folks to do something like this, that for many of them may be something that they never thought about doing themselves, and understanding the important role that pollinators have in ecosystems. And while the activity is fabulous, of course, and that you managed to get folks there, are there conversations taking place at what is the larger things that they may be addressing? Have you heard from them about how this may be directly associated with climate change resilience? I would be curious.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much, Maurice, for this question. Yes, we have been really reconfiguring the understanding and the connection of neighbors to our program through the lens of climate change resiliency. We've, in particular this year, we've included a component to each of our, used to be kind of, we would say, come join our pollinator planting. Like back in the day, it would be like a nice invitation to just come and plant and volunteer together in the neighborhood. But this year in particular, we've created all of our flyers, and they've always been translated into Spanish and then additional languages with the message of it'll be a workshop and a planting. And our workshop component, which would take about 30 minutes at the beginning of each planting, like a theory before the hands-on learning begins, would include the particular language and conversation and kind of the circling, focusing developing the wildlife habitat, but then why is it important, and why are native plants important in particular, and not just any selection, and with the definitely ultimate messaging to creating climate resilient spaces, and how small solutions can in fact make a difference.
Thank you. Murat.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, Dasha, I just wanted to say, wonderful project, very inspirational. And I was really glad to see the careful attention you're paying to connectivity. since many pollinators don't have that big of a range, it's great that you're sort of providing these little stepping stones of habitat. And my question was, are you monitoring who shows up? Are there universities or anybody monitoring what exact insects are appearing after you do the project?
Yes, thank you for that question. We've Greenlands has done monitoring in the past with I know with the I've seen materials from the PSU collaboration, and I've also seen the materials developed for like a very thorough monitoring guide and logbook. We haven't in particular galvanized that aspect this year, but we will definitely put it into the cycle for next summer. We'll circle back to finding out who is visiting these spaces once the plants are better established and fuller. And yes, we definitely will aim to make the information available on that for our own purposes, for the learning experiences, and also for the public.
Thank you.
Dasha, thank you so much for a great presentation. That's very inspirational. We wish you similar success in the future, and hopefully we'll see you again. That was really nice presentation. It helps us wrap our heads around what people are doing with the funding that we're providing. It's very useful information. So thanks
so much
for coming.
Thank you all, definitely. We are very grateful for this investment into our community and wildlife. Thank you so much. Bye.
All right, nicely done. Okay, well, that was a great, nice segue into working on some more stuff. I think at this point, it's time for public comment. Isn't that right, Riva?
Yeah, hi there. Sorry about that. There was someone in the lobby and it kind of froze me for a second there. So next up, we actually have our public comment. So we can open it up to any members of the public who'd like to comment on today's meeting or have any comments to add. And if you do have one, you feel free to raise your hand, put it in the chat, and we can give you that time to speak.
I'd actually like to ask if Mike Toady is out there, or maybe Tim Grethus, to comment on that video and where that might be going, or just give us a little insight on that well done video. Is either of you two guys?
Yeah, Carl, thanks. Mike Toady here with Conservation Director of Oregon Hunters. And that video was put together by ODOT as kind of a kickoff recognition for that Gilchrist Wildlife Crossing there. So I'm not sure what their distribution plans are for it. You know, I checked in with them, wanted to make sure that folks on this committee had the opportunity to see it. I think it was about a $10,000. I'm old and I'm going from memory here, folks, so bear that in mind. But I think that was about a $10,000 grant that we got from OCRF, and it was one of the first ones that was put out there. So I just wanted to make sure folks had the opportunity to see that success. But
That was in our very first portfolio projects, and was also a project where we did our very first leverage grant with what
Pew.
foundation? Who was that?
Pew Charitable Trust. Yep.
Pew Charitable Trust, which really started us on that path that ended up having us raise $1.4 million of private funds. And this was the kickoff to that. Pew Charitable Trust saw the value of that, and we were able to match I think it was $60,000, and we matched that. So it was really, that was a big deal for us. So that project all the way around was good. Mark Stern, you have your hand up?
Yeah, Mike, great video there, great work. I was just going to ask, I know OCRF funded a project on the Bend to Subtle Lake Wildlife Crossing review. I just wondered if OHA, I believe you guys are involved in that, and if you had any just updates or observations on how that one was going to play out.
Yeah, and I think Tim's still on the call there too. He was the Oregon Wildlife Foundation was the lead on that, but that was money that we're using for a feasibility study, and that just got kicked off here. In fact, Tim hosted a kind of a kickoff meeting there, so maybe if Tim's still on, he could probably answer that question better than I.
Yeah, happy to do that. Yeah, we had the kickoff meeting for the Bend to Subtle Lake Wildlife Crossing analysis on Tuesday of last week, and went really well. I think we got a good start. We've assembled enough funding, and that includes OCRF support. Thank you very much for that. To hire consultants. So River Design Group and Samara Group are working together to do that mitigations analysis in that Bend, that Subtle Lake to Bend corridor. The final outcome of that is probably won't be decided until the maybe June of next year. We're just kind of getting started now. But I'm very excited about that. It's going to be a good project. That section of Highway 20 is, I believe, in terms of wildlife collisions, the worst or one of the worst in the state. So whatever we can do to address it we're money ahead for sure.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Well, thanks to both of you guys for that. And I don't know if there's a way, but to get that distributed as far and wide as possible would be great. Maybe through ODF and W. OCRF isn't mentioned in it, but it's such a great project. And with the emphasis on the state of really looking at wildlife crossings, I just would like to see that distributed. So I'd ask you guys to think about that and get that thing around there. Like you sent to us, send it to a whole lot more people. It's a great video.
And Tim, do you know, does Sydney Bowman kind of have a distribution plan for that beyond like our network?
That's a good question. I think the fact that Mac Lynn with ODOT is prominently featured in it would suggest that they probably have a plan to distribute it far and wide. I was actually really pleased that he took the time to be and participate in it, and was so complimentary of the project, and happy that ODOT got it across the finish line. So. I don't have a specific outreach plan that I'm aware of, but I'm certain that they have plans for getting that out, if nothing else, to all the regions.
Great. Okay, well, thank you guys. Is there any other public comment out there? Reva, has anybody commented to you or connected?
I haven't heard anything, Carl. I think we we can close public comment for now.
So what we've got now is for 20 minutes before we take a break, Sherilyn is going to go through some of the stakeholder outreach update, which I'm really anxious to hear about. Sherilyn, are you ready to do that?
Yes, I am ready. Hello, everybody. Good to see you again this month. And as Carl mentioned, this is kind of the wrap up of the stakeholder outreach information. So last month I had done some of the interviews, but then in the last month I finished those interviews. And just as a reminder, these were all external stakeholders that I was chatting with, so people outside of the advisory committee. And I can show you, I can go through that list again just to sort of refresh your memory if need be. So last month I provided some of this, and then what I did is updated the slides based on the additional conversations that I had over the last month. So we'll just go through it. And in this case, because we have a little bit more time, I'd really like to hear reactions, things that resonated with you about what the externals are saying, things that surprised you. I think those are really good conversations just to see how much our advisory committee is kind of in sync with kind of what we were hearing from the externals. So a reminder up there, who were these external folks that I chatted with? Well, they were grant applicants both successful grant applicants and at least one that was not successful in getting a grant. ODFW staff members, so we had a little focus group session with some folks from ODFW, a couple of ODFW commissioners, including the chair, and I also found some time to chat with Representative Helm. So those were the people that I went out and chatted with. This is kind of an overall sentiment slide. It looks almost identical to the one I showed you last month, as nothing really changed. As I finished the rest of the interviews, the group is overwhelmingly positive about the work that the OCRF does, really happy about the diversity of projects that are going on all across the state, the fact that there are big projects, small projects, and then again, the success and the outreach capabilities. So there's strong feeling that that goal of really broadening access to groups not traditionally involved has been a successful undertaking. So it's just a little overview of the general sentiment and feeling, very similar to what I shared last month. If you go to the next slide, Reva.
Yep, thanks. Just let me know when you're ready for the next one.
Yeah, no worries.
Hey,
So this,
Cheryl, before you go on, can you go back to that slide?
yeah.
There's a couple of things on there, I think, that's I've been thinking about, and this is helpful. The idea of people appreciate the diversity of our projects, where we have big ones and small ones and the variety of types. That's something that I have always kind of wondered, well, maybe we should just do big projects, or maybe we should, we'll get more bang for the buck that way. I think, though, that this feedback is very helpful to me, and that's a winning strategy that we've got with our diversity of projects. That puts a little bit more of an onus on our staff, Reva and the staff having to work through these. But again, I think it's this is just getting feedback that's a valuable thing for us to continue to do. And that goes for the next line, where we intentionally kept it so that we could maybe reach entities that aren't part of the usual fundraise or grant process, and try to keep that open, so we would entertain grants from people that aren't maybe as competent in writing grants. And I think that's been very valuable, and I'd hate to see that change as well. So I think that slide's very helpful to me anyway. So thanks.
Great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Carl. Does anybody have a different perspective, or do people kind of agree with Carl's reaction to those couple of points? I see some head nodding, so that's helpful. Okay. If we go on to the next slide, this is a newer slide. So one of the questions I always ask in there is, if you were on the advisory committee, or they ask you for their opinion, and remember, these are just their opinions, it's still the advisory committee's decision what your priority action should be. What do you think some of their priorities should be over the next couple of biennium? So I think there was support for that storytelling communication that we talked about at the last meeting, right? So specifically demonstrating results was an important component of that, helping the OCRF to stand out. There was a lot of conversation, and I think you've had it as well, that it's a crowded space. Even though you fill a niche, there's still a lot of people out there trying to talk about the importance of conservation and things similar to your world. And so how do you stand out? And again, how do you just connect more people in communities to the conservation concepts that the OCRF supports? So those were some specific pieces of feedback on, if you were to up your storytelling communication game, these are areas they thought would be important. Partnership was very important, came up quite often. as part of helping to tell the OCRF story. So recognizing that the advisory committee has limited resourcing, how do you use your coalition and or your partners to help you tell the story, to continue to have a diverse project list. So by having a coalition of a lot of different organizations, that provides an opportunity to have more diversity. And then thirdly, to maybe augment funding options. So partnering with others that can help you provide funds. So Carl mentioned that example a little bit earlier from the previous project, the wildlife crossing we were talking about. Continuing to build relationships with groups not typically involved in the space. A big message around flexibility and prioritization really started coming up loud and clear through the second half of the interviews, right? Recognizing that you've gotten a lot of different kinds of money coming your way lately. That's going to require the advisory committee to be flexible, but also to prioritize, because you all know you don't have enough money to fund every project that comes your way, and they're all great projects. But with limited funds, you know, it becomes really important to think about, well, what are our priorities? And there's some information about that as well. So they really thought focusing on habitat protection and restoration, priority species, mitigating the impacts of climate change were all things that might help you prioritize when having to choose, you know, these projects and not others. Maintaining momentum and commitment to the cause. So, you know, the advisory committee has been really praised for all of your hard work, your subject matter expertise, your commitment to the work that you do. But everybody recognized that there will be turnover. There has been some already, but there in the future, some of you may not be here. So how do we bring new committee members in that are just as committed, just as enthusiastic as all of you have been over the last couple of years, as a really important thing for you to be thinking about in the future. And then continuing sort of the passive fundraising efforts. Everybody thought that was an important thing to continue doing. So like I said, I'm going to pause there because those are some specific, you know, suggestions that some of the externals shared. I want to hear which ones resonate with you, which ones surprise you. What's just your general feeling about some of these directions that I heard? Kelly.
I was just noticing the unique on the last slide. It was saying, you know, that we have, I think it said we have diverse project types. This slide says seek and utilize partnerships that diverse project types. So we have traditionally been somewhat weak in the restoration recreation department. So maybe places like partnering more with those groups that met last week, things like that, in more of the recreation world really could help with us. And then, yeah, nothing, you know, on the Oregon Hunter, loved seeing that video. I thought it was awesome, but I noticed our logo in the end of it either. And I was like, oh no, there's like a whole great of all the, you know, people who stuff. And then there goes a perfect opportunity to sort of toot your horn a little bit. Again, these things happen all the time. It's a busy world, but I think just like, yeah, getting on every little, you know, our logo on like PD things, like just kind of getting your number out there in places where we wouldn't normally put it. So think creation spaces, boat launches, or other places like there are times when we can like get our logo associated with some work places, or if we are in somebody's recreation work, can we be on the map, you know, those kind of things. That's a lot kind of like really trying to leverage other people's work that they're doing and leveraging those other partnerships, I think is cool. So that speaks to me.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. You were breaking up for me. I just want to know if she was breaking up for other people or if it was me.
No, that was.
Okay. It was everybody. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
I can still hear you, Kelly. It's not like we couldn't really get the gist of what you were saying. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't just me. It was everybody. Okay. Mauricio.
So a couple of themes sort of like surface for me. Clearly, the OCRF is addressing a perceived gap, or at least some untraditional subgroups within the conservation and recreation sphere that feel that this is an opportunity for them, which I think is was certainly one of our goals. And that sort of like explains why they feel that we may need to be telling their story to a wider audience, which I also agree with, and to take a little bit more of an active role in making that story reach out in places that perhaps they haven't gotten to yet. And I also see that the way that they see this could be achieved is by building relationships with those non-traditional groups, which also tells me that relying exclusively in, let's say, an updated website or places that only people who already are part of this known community can see it is important, as an important factor and a variable that we need to consider in our communication efforts moving forward. But it's also pretty reassuring that they do see us as an opportunity to find help and funding in places they couldn't otherwise. Because I feel that is an important role that we need to fulfill. So reassuring, and also some interesting vectors of action that we could take moving forward.
Great. Thanks for those comments, Mark.
Yeah, I think a little bit following up, Maurice, on your comments, what comes to my mind is, how do we, as one strategy, how do we activate the coalition of partnerships to help tell the stories and get the word out? And because I think it's a bigger effort than just us, and sort of, as you say, than just a web page. It's how do we create that momentum among the coalition of partners to tell the stories so that everybody's sort of hearing it and buying into it. And then the other, looking at this slide and the previous one, I can see the tension between the first slide suggests, doing a diversity of projects was something that everybody liked, big and small. And then the second slide sort of comes back around to, well, but you need to prioritize and funds may be limited. And so you may need to focus. So I think that those are both good observations, but I think it's just interesting to see it's a little bit of a push me, pull you proposition on which way you lean there. Something I think we'll have to figure out. Also, our funding's become a little more restricted, which is another form that may limit us from being as diverse as we might otherwise want to be in funding projects.
Yeah, all good points. Thanks, Mark. Marit?
Well, I was talking to my husband a little bit about this and just sort of how do you get out there and tell the story? And looking at these results, it talks about sort of the non-traditional folks that we've engaged and then the traditional. And I think there's like a niche of non-traditional in the traditional. For instance, he pointed out to me that this document, which is the sport fishing guide that ODF&W produces by the probably tens of thousands, maybe more. It has all these full color pages in it. And what would it take to get ODF&W to feature a fish project in one of those pages? Or, the recreation report that comes out every week, having just a little story. So, asking ODF&W how they, as one of our, they are, who are we trying to support here, but also using some of their traditional ways of communicating and reaching out, because the hunters and fishermen are one of our huge supporters, but they may not really be completely aware of what's going on with the diversity of projects, and it would be really great to figure out how to do that, especially with these beautiful full color publications that are produced by the tens of thousands, and you can pick up everywhere. So it was an interesting idea.
Yeah,
Right,
that is.
Thank your husband for that idea. So Riva, put that on your to-do list. We need to talk to the appropriate individuals to see if we can make something like that happen. Because that part of this, and as we're talking about telling the story, I'm thinking, well, why do we have to tell the story? What's the reason we're telling the story? certainly one is just to make people aware of conservation and promote that. But another one is maintaining our funding and keeping us funded. And if we can tell that story and get the story out to particularly hunters and fishermen that are going to potentially donate to us via the website, then with that, we need to focus on that. And I had my hand up to comment further on that very thing, is as we're talking about improving storytelling. The question is, why are we telling the story? What's the purpose? Why does it matter? Beyond, first of all, maybe recruiting more applicants and getting more people involved, but it's also to secure our funding. So the way that we would do that is figure out how to, this is more of an action item on the storytelling, and that is, how do we use our coalition to go to the legislature and help us get more funding, not only the restricted funding, but the unrestricted funding. So the purpose of the storytelling, part of it is that we got to figure out how to maximize the story to our funders, since we're not really doing the public funding other than the ODF&W website. We're not competing with these groups. So they should be more than happy to go to our legislators, because that just makes the pie bigger for distribution of funding across the conservation landscape. So that's what, so it's great to tell the story just because it's a good story, but we have to have a specific goals, and improving our funding has to be a big part of that.
So keep those thoughts in mind. At our last meeting, we started writing goals for the storytelling, and you almost said them verbatim, Carl. So, but I added one that you mentioned today that's new. So when we get to the goals and actions, let's go back to that and make sure we don't forget any of these great comments that have been coming up.
Yeah, be sure you write it down, because I'll forget all of them.
I wrote it down.
Tim Grethis has his hand up. I'm happy to hear his input.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know what the rule set is for making comments in this section, but one of the things that occurs to me about OCRF is there is a healthy tension, I think, between recreation and conservation, and we all know there's this human dimension, right, of how do you conserve spaces and still allow for people to not occupy the space, because that sometimes runs counter to what your goals are. But I guess my question is there room for OCRF to be kind of a thought leader about the human dimension of this nexus of recreation and conservation? There's research out there, but as far as I know, there's no organizations that are really capturing it in one place. Information that might give some guidance to people who are recreating in our public spaces or public lands, that will help them understand how they can do that in a way that's least disturbing to wildlife, for example. There's a piece there that I think would be kind of neat for OCRF to be a resource, kind of, if you will, a repository for how to do both things. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Tim. That's a lot for us to think about. I could see actually where we could fund that very thing. We ourselves might not be the right entity to do it, but we could certainly fund someone to do exactly what you just said. And a little bit of that was done when we funded the drought issue with ODF&W. So we have done that kind of thing. So that's within our bailiwick for sure. All right, Shirley, carry on.
Reva, next slide, if you don't mind. There we go. So these were just some summary, I kind of am describing, of words of advice that seem to come through almost all of the conversations. So continuing to be good stewards. Obviously, you have a good reputation. That's important to maintain. Be an effective supplement for other funding. So recognize where people could maybe be redirected if you're not really the right place for them. Make sure that you're keeping your funds for the things that are most applicable for your purpose. And that kind of goes to this next one of being true to your original purpose. That's a little tricky, right? Because you're getting different funds coming to you with distinct restrictions and purposes, but not forgetting kind of the origin of where the OCRF, was birthed, so to speak. Clearly communicate project criteria. So as things change, as things evolve, as you receive a pot of money that has specific things, being sure to communicate why those are the priorities for that particular grant cycle so that applicants are aware. And it could be that they had a project that was good for a past cycle, but might not be good for the next cycle, depending on, where the source of that money is and restrictions that might be in place. And then, there was a sentiment that, OCRF can't solve everything, but continue to set high expectations, which they think the committee has already been doing. And so they would hope that the committee would continue to dream big. That was actually a quote that somebody used in one of the interviews, and think about, what the future might be able to hold. So those were kind of some words of advice. Again, just a quick pause in case anybody wants to comment on something that resonated with them here. Okay. And then Riva, go to the next slide. Oh, I think when it went over to Riva, it got a little weird. It might be hard for you to read that first bullet, but I'll help you out if need be. So this was a list. Some of them were in the slide deck I gave you last month, but they've been updated based on new things I heard. So these were more specific opportunities where people had very specific suggestions for the committee. So I tried to put them on a slide together. So the first one is around what to invest in. So people had definite ideas on what the priorities should be. So obviously the Oregon conservation being important, habitat restoration, protection important. Sorry, that swirl is even hard for me to read. The nearshore strategy came up. So, when we talked with ODF&W, they reminded everybody that there are other kinds of priorities as well that are in some of the other plan documents. So interesting, Tim mentioned, a role for the OCRF and maybe helping to be describing the nexus between recreation and conservation. One thing that came up a couple of times is what's OCRF role in planning for climate change? And is that a place for OCRF to lean in a little bit heavier, especially given that there might be funding sources that become available in support of planning for climate change? So what's the nexus there between climate change and the priorities that OCRF already has? The outreach we already talked about many times, but again here, just there were some specific recommendations. A lot around letting the projects speak for themselves. So getting help from the people that are out there doing the projects and telling those stories. Oops. There we go. A little bit of comment about funding, and then some suggestions around models for funding projects that OCRF is not able to fund, because I know this committee, it's always sad when something doesn't make that line. What can we do to help them find some funding some other way, and or point potential applicants to projects that didn't get funded. So a lot of people just were throwing out ideas on what you could do for projects that you aren't able to fund. Questions on this? I know there's a lot on this slide, some of it from last month, some of it newer with some more specific. Another thing that was new this month was around the larger landscapes versus one piece at a time. That was new from last time, and really sort of that focus on water and land being so critical to habitat protection. Eliza Jane.
Thank you. So many good comments and thoughts. When I first looked at this, thank you for sending out ahead of time. I stopped on this focused investment part and read that you know, the desire for us to prioritize protection of the key habitats and restoration, species, wildlife species. And I think that from my experience, OCRF is unique in that we fund conservation and recreation. And I don't know, I'm not clear as a member how do we define recreation? And I heard Tim talk about that and Kelly talk about that. And I think it would sure help me to know what our position is on recreation, and then we could do the outreach and the public could better understand how we see that being a fundable activity. I think that personally think the two are the same. I talk often about conservation, recreation, and agriculture occurring on the same property, on the same landscape, that those three things fit really well together. And that seems to be not a common perception, but I would like to know how we perceive recreation that we would fund, what's necessary, and then absolutely incorporating climate resilience ideas and activities into both of those things, and be clear about that as we start to let people who are going to request funds, we need to know what we expect before we can tell them, and then they can ask us. So I'm very new still to this group, but I'm also not sure what we mean by recreation and what it is and isn't, and how we can best support that aligns with our goals.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll take a stab actually at answering that and then see what the rest of the committee members think. One of the things, Liza Jane, we do is we let the applicants self-identify what they think their project is. They mark recreation, conservation, where does it fit in? And that's partly how we identify what a recreation project is. And what we've done in the past is we've gotten a lot of just pure recreation projects. Like one was a skeet shooting range and something like that. That those get ranked, but what ranks higher is if there is a conservation component to the recreation. For instance, I think one of the best examples we have is the Ochoco Trails project, where there's a need for more trails in the Ochoco National Forest. That's clearly recreational, but they came to us for funding to look at how the trails were placed so as to minimize wildlife disturbance. To me, that is like the perfect example of a recreation project that we can fund. It's to get people outdoors, get them hiking, but to do it in a way that has minimum impact on wildlife. So I think that's how we've thought about it in the past, if that makes it any clearer to you. But I'm really happy to hear what other committee members have to say about that. And so how about Mark?
Well, I was going to go in a different direction, so I'll pause, I guess, if others want to comment on recreation.
Yeah, maybe I can give a quick comment just from an external, perspective on this, that, your comment, Liza Jane, might be a good action as part of the strategic plan to better be able to describe that nexus, because I heard in a couple of meetings back a whole conversation trying to define that amongst the committee members. And if the committee members are trying to get aligned in the messaging, I would imagine applicants aren't necessarily sure what qualifies. And or even I heard like from some of our ODFW reviewers, that help review the applications, they might not be entirely sure as well. So it could be a good action for you to invest a little bit of time in making that. That's my just external looking in at what I've been hearing and seeing could be a good action to consider.
Thank you,
But any,
Sherilyn. Yeah, I think there, I also saw a comment in here that there, I think the first slide, you know, there are a lot, there's quite a few funders that fund restoration. And I don't know of many that fund both. One thing came up at the J.C. Boyle Dam, the people that recreated there, they would all come up and there's 4 or 5 family businesses that come up and wait for them to open the spillway. And that's when they ran their rafts down that Spencer Creek, I think. But they're all going to be out of business. And so how, you know, is there an opportunity for them to get support in creating a different kind of business with the new system there? And several people looked at me and said, well, isn't that something OCRF would do? And I'm like, so yeah, I think there's lots of potential, but I don't know. So, okay, thank you.
Sherilyn, can you build that into this as one of the things that we'll do in this process?
yeah, I just typed it over on our mural board. So when we go over there, you'll see it there.
Great.
Anybody else
Liza,
want to
Jane,
comment? Yeah.
I just put the, sorry it's so long. I just went into the expenditure framework and pulled out the recreation projects that the advisory committee will prioritize and put that in the chat, and it is quite long. Sorry about that, but feel free to refer to that, and could also send out our expenditure framework if it's helpful to folks.
That would be great. I don't know how to save stuff that's in the chat, so if you could send that to me, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mark Stern?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the funding piece that said there, and I think sort of trying to reconcile when OCRS started, all of us actually had a role in fundraising, and we're trying to build up the fundraising. And obviously now it's been successfully funded through a couple different legislative sessions. And so I can see the comment about how sustainable funding is not the committee's problem to solve. You know, somebody could say it's Rep. Helm's problem or ODF&W's problem, or they're the ones in the position to solve it. But and maybe I just feel personally invested in it and realize that we need sustainable funding to be successful in the future. So I also think our committee is thinking about it more. Well, more is maybe not a good word, but we're thinking about it a lot along with others. And so I don't necessarily agree that we don't have a role in helping to solve that problem.
I 100% agree with what Mark just said. I think it is our problem. And I think part of that is we can't lobby specifically. Maybe that's what the meaning of that is, but
It is. Yeah.
We can certainly facilitate information going in the right way, the right place.
Yes. And that's why I think that comment sort of then got shifted into the storytelling thing again, right? So getting information to the right individuals that can then pursue actions that are not within the role of the advisory committee, I think is where that was trying to get shifted because of that limitation, Carl, right?
Yeah, right.
But
I think
you have to make sure that the right people have the right information so that they can do advocating. Yeah, go ahead, Mark. I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think there's also a window before the next governor's budget comes out where, you know, there is some more room to think about ways to create more funding opportunities for OCRF, because until the governor has a specific position on it, it's kind of an open field conversation. And, you know, Carl and I had an opportunity to testify before the commission last year to share our 2 cents on, we're thinking ODF&W should consider a higher pop than they were originally creating. So there's some give and take in there, but I think we have a role in helping to figure out where it goes from here.
Great. other comments on this slide? Okay, we'll keep moving along. Reva, there you go. And this is exactly the slide that you saw last time. So there was nothing new. I just left it in there because as of the last meeting, I had chatted with everybody that was an applicant. So nothing new came up since there were no new applicants I chatted with in the second part of the outreach. So I just wanted to have it all here in one presentation though. So you saw all this last month about how the applicants felt about the application process. So that, yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
I was just gonna say, hopefully I'm not breaking up too much now, but who knows? There's storms
No,
going
better.
on.
It sounds better
Okay,
now.
good. It's just a recognition to me too on that second bullet that we probably are hitting several people that may not be like living deep inside the grant world, because it was surprising to me to see that people see our process as more complex than other processes, unless it's just understanding the timeline or something. But I feel like, you know, these grant applications, as for somebody that writes a lot of grant applications, these are relatively straightforward and pretty easy. So it kind of made me think back, like maybe we are actually getting some folks who are still sort of early in their grant writing work, or are not, you know, traditionally used to this kind of work. But anyway, and then I didn't know, yeah, if we've explored anything with Oregon voting or where that kind of came from. That one comment kind of caught me out of left field.
I might have to go back to my notes on that. But yes, Kelly, I think some of the people that thought it was more complex are newer to doing this kind of work. So like you said, kind of a good thing. I think the Oregon Boating was just another organization that funds recreation-oriented projects. And so I think it was thrown out there like not all recreation projects qualify for OCRF funding, but here's a place where maybe some of those projects could get funded. So if you had a relationship with them, you might be able to easier, you know, kind of push things over to the left and sort of, you know, not keep them in your space.
I think there might be a different take on that. There had been some talk, not the Oregon Boating Foundation, but the Marine Board, where it was the Marine Board could have a checkbox which I just re-registered 2 boats that you could check a donation to OCRF. I think that might be our
I'll
ability.
check on that, Carl.
Yeah, I think it was a reference to that.
Another passive fundraising, yeah.
I've never heard of the Oregon Boating Foundation, but I have heard of the Marine Board. So, and
okay, I'll check that and see if it got swapped out.
Yeah.
Thanks for pointing that out so I can get it corrected. So that is the conclusion of, you know, the high level, you know, summary of what we heard. Obviously, I have a lot more detailed notes, and all their interviews were kind of private. I just tried to pull out the themes that I thought were most important and came across multiple groups that I spoke with. And I think we're taking a break because we thought it'd be good to come back refreshed before we jump in. Kelly?
Sorry, I just wanted to say one more thing, and I think it's just because it hits me personally, is on the equity piece too, like giving a little more grace. I mean, this room is kind of full of people with some experience and past and science and, you know, and all these kind of things. So I do think the equity and access one is one that we are going to have to like tangibly talk about and tackle. About how we are looking at these grant applications, because I know personally that I do, you know, judge also if it's not like totally up to par, or if one's like really well put together, you know, that's in there where I'm already kind of, you know, ranking those. So how are we going to actively work against that if that is a goal of ours too? So just I'll leave it at that and know that we need to address it probably.
Yeah, great comment, Kelly. So let's come back at 2:45. Carl, is that okay with you? We were going to do a 5-minute break, and then we will dive back into priorities and goals that we started last month.
Sounds great. We'll see everyone in a minute.
See you then.
Bye.
Welcome back.
All right. So most of us are back. Reva and Sherilyn, James Frazier in the audience put on the chat a really nice he went back and found some things in our statutes, in the OARs regarding the recreation and conservation piece. So if I don't know how to save this stuff, but it would be good to save what he puts for reference later. If you guys see what I'm talking about in the chat.
Yes.
Yes,
Yep,
pretty good.
it'll be
Really
saved.
good. So thanks to James Frazier for putting that together for us. That's helpful. The other, I think she's, Srishti was not able to, I should have mentioned Srishti had a mandatory thing she had to be to, but I see her name. I believe she's with us. And so Srishti,
Hi, Carl.
hey Srishti, we're glad to have you. Thanks for joining
Thank you.
us.
I'm still driving back from Salem, but I'm listening into the call from my car, and I should be home shortly to be able to join on video.
Okay, well, that's great, Srishti. Thanks for listening. Okay, so, and I don't think we need a quorum or anything, so we
Yep.
may not need to ask her. All right, well, Sherilyn, you want to move ahead?
Yes, let's move ahead. Reva, would you mind putting the deck up? Just, there's a couple of slides I'm going to show, and then we're going to jump over and work in our mural for the rest of our time together. Do you still have it handy?
Can you see that? It's showing that I'm presenting it, but it might not be showing to you guys.
I'm not seeing it. Is anybody else seeing
No?
it?
It says strategic plan, focus areas, goals, and actions.
Okay.
That's what I can see.
No, you can't see it.
No, but it did have
For a
strategic
minute.
plan.
There it is.
There it is. It's
Okay.
back. All right. So if you just go to the next slide, Reva, I think every time we've been getting together, I like to just remind people these key questions that we put together at the very beginning of what we hope to have in the strategic plan. So we're going to have a section on what we've accomplished to date, but more specifically, we want to have priorities and goals and actions that we want to take over the next 4 years. So that's what we're going to be working on a lot today. And then there are other things around communication needs and adaptability and storytelling and fundraising that I think go to all of the topics that we've been talking on. So just a good reminder for us to keep these in mind. And then one other slide, Reva. So when we did our SWOT analysis, I kind of pulled out some categories that emerged so that we could talk about them category by category, or what I call focus areas sometimes. So we had a lot of comments around storytelling, public perception, partnerships, application process, and resources, focus for investment and funding. So my suggestion at the last meeting was that we take each of these 5 areas and start to talk about what might be potential goals and actions in each one of those areas. And just as a refresher for those of you at the last meeting, we started with storytelling last month. So we have a draft, but I want to pull it back up because you might have had new thoughts since then. So we'll go back to what we did for storytelling. Then we'll do that exact same thing for each of the other 4 categories. Sound good? All right, so now I will take the sharing. Reva, thank you for sharing all the slides so far.
No problem.
Sure, I share the right thing. So our mural should have come up, yes? Great.
Yep.
And what you should be seeing is, so what I did after our original SWOT analysis and all of the brainstorming that you did, I organized them now by these categories. So this first one is all around storytelling, public perception. I put the ledge support in there as well, because that's another sort of audience where perceptions are kind of important, and or we might be concerned about getting messaging to them based on that funding conversation we had going into the break. So everything related to those categories is all in one place. And at the last meeting, we did a pretty good job, I think, of starting to throw out some potential actions and potential goals. Why would we be doing these things, right? Why would it be important to do better storytelling, think about our ledge support and or how the public is perceiving us? And so we came up with some pretty good goals. So Carl, that's what I was referring to. You almost read those verbatim. So you must have a good memory from last time, and or they still make sense to you today. So that's what we did at the last meeting, but we can edit them. So potential goals here was promote greater understanding of OCRF's purpose. And so that could be with applicants, potential donors, the coalition, the ledge. Share importance of conservation needs in Oregon. I kind of put my own question mark, Oregon conservation strategy, other, how do we want to define that? Carl, you mentioned this one, maintain funding to support your investment priorities. And then I threw one out while we were talking earlier, was around, is there a goal that we would want to recruit more grant applicants? I know you already don't fund everything that comes your way. So when I heard that, I wrote it as a question mark, but these were some potential goals. And then we came up with actions on the right. I did do a little wordsmithing between last time and today. I'll do that again between today and next time. So a lot of your actions over here were individual actions that I kind of merged together because they're really all elements of a communications plan. So you were talking about, well, who do we want to get our messages to? How are we going to get them out there? I kind of compiled them into one big action around developing a communications plan. Really, it should be both, right? You don't want to just have a plan. You actually want to start doing it. So develop and execute a communications plan. There was some suggested actions around getting linkage from the grant recipients and or using the places where they're talking about their projects. Somebody used that as leveraging other people's work earlier. So I think that's what that one is mainly about, collecting success stories. And then I did put maybe a holding spot for better defining that nexus between recreation and conservation, if you guys still think it's a good idea. So one thing to remember, they both say potential actions, potential goals, because we're going to do this for every category, and then we might have to prioritize and say, wow, that's kind of a lot of stuff. So that's why they're all labeled as potential right now. So that's catching you up on what we talked about last time in this category. Comments about the goals and actions are there. Additional goals or actions, etc. Liza.
I would like to, thank you. I think we can take the question mark away from number 4. Yeah.
What do others think?
Agreed. I don't know that I think we have to be accessible for those entities to find us. I don't know that we go out and recruit per se. I don't know if that's the exact right word, but we definitely want to be able to let people know that we're available, that there's especially as Mauricio pointed out, Mauricio texted me and it's like midnight there in Spain and he signed off. But the entities that might not know that it's an opportunity to kind of keep that information available to them, and I agree to actively go and recruit applicants. I think that's appropriate, but it's just a strong word because we do have more than we can fund.
I like how you reoriented that goal. Yeah. Other thoughts about that? there'll be plenty of room for wordsmithing, but we want to get the gist. Do we have the right goals? Do we have the right actions? Are we missing things in this space?
That looks good. That was my interpretation of recruit, was like specifically to the groups that we aren't getting at, not just to get more people, because I'm like, ooh, do we have a threshold? I don't know. How much are we willing to look at? I don't know.
Great.
Yeah, my only thought as a placeholder is, so when are we going to develop a communications plan?
You mean a date by which?
Well, so we wrap this up in December, but I think is maybe doing the communication plan as a separate exercise with a different group of people or a different subset of people. But it'd be nice as we work through this that we also have an idea of how we're going to implement the strategic plan.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's make sure we talk about that in December when we prioritize and we know that that's going to be a priority, which I suspect that one will, what that looks like. But it would be outside of the strategic planning process, but you could start to put some specific goals and how-tos around this. I think one of those is also going to be, we talked about utilizing ODFW communication resources, but I know those are limited. So if the advisory committee resources are limited and ODFW resources are limited, who is going to help with developing said communications plan? And that's exactly an implementation question mark, right? Who and how and when do we create this great plan? Thoughts about that, since we're on this topic already?
Marette, you had your hand up for a second there.
Yeah, it's up. Back to, I have a thought basically on this recruiting applicants, because some of our funding purposes are so narrow. We may need to recruit some applicants that are specialists in certain areas. I mean, if we end up with a bunch of connectivity funding that's centered around highways, then we may need to reach out to a broader group that works in that sort of area. So because if our funding was completely broad as it was in the beginning, I think, we have plenty of applicants, but it's getting more and more targeted. So that's going to be a narrow thing to thread through.
I think that wording allows for that. I mean, I think that's not.
Just putting that to keep a note there so we don't forget about it later.
Yeah.
Somebody just had their hand up.
Liza Jane does.
Yeah.
Just to follow up with Marette's, I think that I imagine that to be in the communications plan. So when we have targeted funding, then this is how we communicate about that. To who? Is that correct?
It could, yeah.
Yeah. But right on, that could include that recruiting effort. But I like the wording there really well. Thank you.
I see Tim Griffiths has his hand up. It looks like I unleashed the floodgates from so, but go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I wanted to mention that Sarah Armstrong, our former marketing and communications manager, worked with Charlotte on a communications plan. So, I mean, I think there was, at least prospectively, maybe ways that the foundation could continue to support further development of communications plan and implementation. We need to obviously get down the road of what that would look like, but it makes some sense. We're already maintaining OregonIsAlive.org. We still collect financial contributions on behalf of the Oregon Conservation Recreation Fund. So I'm just throwing that out that if there's a place for the foundation to help with this, we're standing ready to do that. So I'll stop there.
Great, thanks, Tim, for and again, I think as I mentioned, I don't know if you all were here, but there's a lot of really innovative ways to integrate with the Oregon Wildlife Foundation. We need to keep that in mind as we're going through this whole process.
Great. Any other comments about this category? Nothing major missing from your perspective for goals and actions. Okay. Okay to move on to another focus area then. I think we did a good job last month of getting this one going, and I want to get the other ones going as well.
Looks good.
All right. So let's move over to partnerships. So in case you need to just sort of remind ourselves, partnerships has been coming up quite a bit. You can see here how we sort of defined where our strengths and weaknesses were. There's clearly a connection to funding oriented with partnerships. Actually, I need to move that to another box. But lots of opportunities. I'm gonna zoom in here. My computer is being slow to zoom, but a lot of different partnerships came up when we spoke before, and you were doing the SWOT analysis. So one potential goal, it was actually in the storytelling from last month, but I moved it over to the partnerships category because I think it's more appropriate here. So if it looks familiar, that's because it was there last month. I just moved it. But somebody had thrown out that maybe there's a potential goal to strengthen the OCRF coalition. I put some added questions there, you know, for what purpose, what would we want them to be doing? I think we would need to be a little bit more specific. But with that said, potential actions or goals that you think would be important in the next 4 years related to partnerships.
You mean beyond what, I mean, there's the ones, that list of partnerships that you have there. I didn't see anything in there that I didn't think was.
That was just brainstorming, yeah. So it's more, you know, how do we translate some of the brainstorming that people made into some specific goals and actions that the committee as a whole thinks are a good idea?
Some of those fall into the OCRF coalition. But like the idea of trying to partner with some of the businesses that are based on outdoor recreation, like REI and Orvis, that would be something for us to discuss, and if we wanted to pursue that.
Thoughts from others? And are there other partnering groups beyond the coalition and the private businesses that Carl mentioned that are recreation targeted?
You have listed in there the foundations, the foundation community. And again, I think that there's opportunities for us to, in an innovative way, to coordinate better than we do with them. I mean, part of it is just who's the time factor of who can do it, but
yeah,
we're working in the same space, and there's ways to leverage what we do with the funding from those entities. So,
Maurette, we have a bunch of hands popping up.
So when I think about partnership, I think about collaboration. And one of the kind of rules that I used to hear about collaboration a lot is that if you're not collaborating well internally, you can't collaborate well externally. And so I think a goal would be to strengthen our internal collaboration, both with the advisory committee and with ODF&W. So, you know, sometimes I don't want to pick on ODF&W, but I feel like there are certain, there's that tension that Tim talked about between recreation and conservation, that perhaps if we emphasize conservation too much, then people will stop buying fishing licenses. And I'd really love to see if we could build a stronger collaborative culture with some of the traditional groups in ODFNW that have been very much sort of related to hunting and fishing, and also between us. I mean, we have these nice meetings and they're great, but I think having those in-person meetings sometimes really spark more ideas on how we could work together. So internal collaboration, that's my thought.
Thanks. I'm glad you put that up. And by the way, if I ever type something and misrepresent, you guys will say, hey, Charlene, that's not really what I meant. But I'm glad you brought that up, Marette, because it actually came up in the ODFW focus group, right? Like, how can they work more collaboratively with the advisory committee when sometimes you do have to prioritize and make decisions and know kind of what's the latest going on and what's ODFW doing that maybe you could help augment and or not play in that space because they're doing some investment in area ABC, right? So appreciate that. I think Eliza Jane's hand was up also. Back over to the screen. Sorry, Kelly, you had your hand up.
Liza did. I think she was on mute.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, and I got so inspired with what Marette said that I kind of forgot mine. But the two groups I thought of was like Ducks Unlimited and Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. Again, those are just a couple groups besides the Community Foundation, but that Within and Without is awesome. And I have noticed post lockdowns that like with OWEB we're meeting a couple times a year in person, and the trust and relationship and just the knowing of each other and is so valuable. And as a board, that board's really growing, and I would sure like to spend some time with all of you. So I'm voting strong on that if we can pull it off.
Come join us in Spain.
I'd love to. Thank you.
Are you offering plane tickets up, Carl? I'll come too. We can finish the strategic plan there. Great. Thanks for that. Adding on, Kelly.
I appreciate that Liza Jane said she got thought and lost in Marette's thought, because I did too. I was like, as I was going, I was like, what was I going to say? And then I formulated it again. But I think an action might be to just investigate even some more of the passive ways that we're fundraising too. I mean, I think that there's a lot of really active fundraising, that we can tackle moving forward, but I feel like there's probably some other, just like the one up there was saying, like, what other partners do we have that we might be able to add to their fee side or something? Or I don't even know, like taxes. How do you get on, like when I sign my taxes at the end of the year, I'm donating, and those just sort of those passive, like just finding those, just because I don't want to miss an opportunity.
Yeah, great. Other thoughts in this space? Yeah, Mark.
Mute.
Right there.
Mark, you're on mute.
Yeah. One thought is, if you look at the webpage, I think it has, logos of 100 different organizations that say they all support OCRF.
Right.
And I think it might be interesting to circle back to that. And I guess I have a couple thoughts. One is to sort of reinvigorate and see what the level of engagement and commitment is with those groups, but also maybe there's a way to identify a diverse group of core partners that we could work with more closely to advance some of our goals. Because I don't think we can bring all 100 along at the same level, but we might be able to have a diverse group of core partners that help us get to the next stage.
Help me out, Mark, with the end of this action. I was getting most of it. So it's a diverse core group that's a subset of the larger coalition groups who you can do more.
storytelling, public outreach, fundraising, kind of all of the above.
Yeah, yeah. In a variety of areas, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I think that's a great point. Good, thanks for making that. That's a good one.
Other potential goals or actions in the partnering space. Is there a potential goal here that, if we're strengthening the coalition, we'd want to identify this subgroup, but do we also kind of want to identify what it is we would want them to be doing on behalf of the OCRF and for what purpose? Can I move that over as part of the actions?
I would say absolutely. I mean, just as a person who signed on with this coalition with the network of Oregon Watershed Councils, like way back when it was Davia, I think, it was like, well, what do we need to do? And it was like, just get on and sign up. But there's like no action items, and that wasn't Davia's fault. I think it just didn't have anything fleshed out yet. But I think having, a better definition of what does it mean to be a partner would be important. And especially for someone who did sign up, it's like, what could I be doing, better? What do you want me to do?
Yep.
I just put my logo on.
What's the ask of our partners?
Right.
Myself, for me, that there's two things that I see. One, we have to go back to why we were formed and what our Bible supposedly is, and that's the Oregon Conservation Strategy. So we would ask them to be supportive of the Oregon Conservation Strategy and to help fulfill it and plug in all the activities that need to happen to make that a reality. The second is fundraising through the legislature. And those are the two main things the coalition can do for us in two different arenas. One is conservation focused, and just so that we can play a role in kind of trying to get everyone pulling on the same oar by using the conservation strategy as a guidebook, and then we can then help get the pie bigger to make that happen by having our coalition support us to their legislators, so that if there's a big outpouring of support for us, we're more likely to get the funding.
Anything big missing here in this space of partnering?
Marat?
Well, going back to something that Carl talked about, the idea that people shouldn't feel like they're competing with us for funding because it makes the pie bigger. And I know early on I had discussions with some of our partners, coalition members, that didn't feel that way. And I wonder if there's any way we can investigate or work on that fear that the pie is limited. And if you get a piece of the pie, then we get less. And, people were just telling me, well, we don't have the capacity to help you. We signed on because we were asked to, but we don't really have the time or energy. And by bringing attention to you, it takes attention away from us. And so there is a fear that there is a limited pie. And I don't know what the answer to that is, but I'm wondering if that's, why didn't we get acknowledgement in that wildlife video? Now that's kind of sad. I haven't looked at it yet, but no, that should have been, that was a key piece of funding early on in the day. And why didn't that happen? So I don't know. That's just the thought.
what I ran into when we were actively, remember, we were trying to raise funds, we were trying to raise private funds, that some of the groups were reluctant to help us with that because the more private funds we raised, the less private funds there were for them. Whereas we're talking about going to the state and getting state funds, that makes the pie bigger. That's why they should no longer have that concern. Srishti has her hand up.
Carl, I think you kind of made my point. My thoughts were exactly what you just outlined here, was that initially the concern was around the fundraising we were doing in addition to the amount allocated by the legislature. But right now, that if that's not necessarily the model we are pressurizing or pushing for really hard, then that shouldn't be a competition. But at the same time, if we are asking our coalition partners to help support us at the legislature itself is also a pretty huge lift. And if we are asking them to do something at the legislature that involves actively lobbying, that's a staff capacity and resource need too. And so it would be helpful if we can be strategic, like how Mark said, in identifying core groups within the coalition that may be able to be more active than others, while others can be more supportive in that role.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I added a step and used some words there that I think get to that, but it's, can we better understand both the capabilities and capacity of our OCF partners, because some will be able to provide assistance in ways that others might not, and or at different times. Liza Jane?
Is there room in the coalition group for private industry?
Well, I'll chime in, but Riva, you can chime in. When we were doing the OARs, I made some comment about making private industries, private companies eligible for grants. And I think, I'm not sure if it was in the legislation, but it's certainly in the OARs that they are not one of the eligible applicants. So it doesn't mean, obviously, we can't have a private partner. And I think we've had some private partners like Keen Shoes and some others, but so I guess it depends what we're asking them to do.
I know
Right,
when I
yeah,
first got
Sorry,
on, I
Liza
went
Jane.
to the coalition page because I wanted the Six Ranch to be a coalition member to support it, and I couldn't find any way to do that. So there could be, private landowners that want to contribute a membership fee or something to support the work, or go testify or something like that as well. So I didn't know if it was acceptable.
I think, yeah, so your question is about the coalition. I don't think we have the same, like, as we do for eligible applicants for the grant that we would for the coalition, but yeah, I can look into that and get back to you. I'm not sure what the application process was that was set up for that.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of worded that as a potentially increasing partnerships with private businesses, depending on what we find out about that. All right. Not the last chance, but unless somebody has something pressing that we're missing here, maybe we pop over to the next category. By the way, when I come back and see all of you, do you still see the mural, or do you see yourselves? You still see the mural? Good, because I come back to see you guys from time to time, and I was wondering, does that mean they can't see the mural when I do that? Liza Jane, you had one more thing before we move on?
I do. Thank you. Is this a spot that we would emphasize building relationship with tribes, or is there another spot? Okay.
I would. What do you have in mind?
Just, I don't know how to word that, but just expanding outreach with tribes for potential partnerships?
Okay. Other thoughts here? All right, let's pop over to the next one, just so we get some draft ideas going in as many categories as possible today. So this one was really around, it was kind of a catch-all. Probably the area in here that we had the most sort of chat about in the SWOT analysis was about resources, right? So we have great resources, but we have limited resources as well. We talked a little bit about the application process and logistics, the timelines, tricky to fill some of our positions in the past. Threats, a couple of things came up. The geographic roles are sometimes tricky. Yeah. So a variety of things came up in this area, and I'm just wondering what you guys feel about this area in terms of, do you think there are things you would like to improve in this area, and what might they be?
I think
If it's a place to put energy, basically.
the second box under resources says it all.
The appointed in a timely fashion.
No, on the strengths.
Yes, this one, right?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. You know, the area that came to mind in this was sort of, you know, what we heard from externals, which is, this is fabulous that we have Carl, who, yes, I agree, is awesome, and an awesome advisory committee who does such a great job. But let's be realistic, over the next 4 years, you're probably going to have some turnover, right? So how do we, is there a potential goal or set of actions you think you guys should be taking to ensure that in 4 years you get all those same kind of great comments about the advisory committee and its membership?
I mean, I think some of it you're working on now with the, you know, building a better grant platform. I would assume that's one of your actions.
Yeah, that's ongoing.
So implementing the new grant platform is kind of already an action being taken, right, Reba?
I'm wondering, when we had the up there, it says the timeline. Is it because people don't think it's fast enough because it's like a 6-month process? I mean, OWEB's kind of like that too. You apply for the fall, you get it in the spring, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that was it. It was mostly like it wasn't fast enough, maybe.
I think that's what it was. Yeah. It's a long process.
Mm-hmm.
But for reasons that might not, you know, be something you can change necessarily.
I don't see a whole lot of action items here that aren't already sort of going on with our integration with the Forest Accord and the, I think those things we are addressing the application process and logistics. I'm not sure that a whole lot more to add to it.
Reba, are you getting lots of callbacks from people for feedback? Because there's times, like, definitely people in my region, they'll call after if they didn't get it, and they'll ask me like how to improve next time. And I'm just wondering how many of those calls you're fielding, or if we need a better process there. Like OWEB will provide you, you know, they got your funding recommendations, and not that we need to, you know, we're not OWEB. But, you know, is there some other mechanism where it's like, possibly even with helping our partners who are not as, you know, informed of this process, of like, what are some steps you could take to improve this, or this is a great application, but I don't know.
Yeah, I get a lot of feedback from folks after the grant, after the recommendations and the approved projects are moved through, and then they want feedback on how they were scored. And so that part of the process, they want feedback for their future application and how they can bolster it. That's a pretty common type of feedback that I'm providing. So, and that process could probably be improved or streamlined, I think, because it's kind of time consuming to, you know, pull the review materials and feedback together and have those meetings. Yeah, I haven't gotten a lot of people reaching out about the application specifically in saying like, oh, you know, it took too long or it was too confusing. I personally haven't had that yet as the coordinator, but I'm not sure if prior coordinators had a lot of feedback like that.
If I'm not mistaken, our last RFP, we really revamped the application. Either that or the one we're going to do. Maybe that was it, Reva. You showed me this is going to be a less cumbersome process going forward. Is that right? Like it's not online, or it is online, but it's not, it's in a different document form. Reva, is that something you showed me?
So I know that I've seen a few of the prior applications, and some of them were a Google form where folks go on and they fill out a Google form, and some of them are short answers, longer answers, checking boxes, that type of thing. And then in the most recent RFP that Charlotte had developed, it was a two-part questionnaire. So there was the Google form and then also the written questionnaire. So written proposal that was emailed to OCRF separately. And I'm not sure if you guys know why that was a two-part application process, but I think with our improvements and our action towards moving into fondant, and we wanted to, I mean, the goal is to have it all in one place and to have it concise and simplified for applicants.
Yeah, I think that's what you ran by me, is the changes that we're planning on doing, so it isn't scattered off. Yeah. So we are addressing that.
Good.
Yeah.
Liza Jane?
Thank you. Was there some concerns with our ODF and W technical reviewers? There was something that we could have made better for them? Have we done that already, or?
I think the only thing I heard in that group was they're not always sure why certain projects get funded and others don't, right? Like it doesn't necessarily, you know, compute to them at all times, and they don't really get feedback. You know, there's not like a closing conversation or something. I mean, they could probably come to the OCRF meetings where you're talking about it, but that might not really give them the same kind of feedback they're looking for. But that did come up, right? Like, huh, interesting. That sounded good when I reviewed it. I'm not really sure why it didn't make it.
Could we include a feedback loop to them? If
Yeah.
nothing less than a giant thank you, but
Yeah.
How we scored it or something.
Yeah, great suggestion. Mark, you had your hand up also.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure it was in here, but I know we've talked about it at different times, but is there something we want the successful applicants to do in terms of outreach or publicizing their grant or their award? And it seems like that.
Yeah.
That piece of it would be in the application in this circle, if you will.
It would. It was sort of, these are not the right words, but you know, we get the right words later, but it's increase.
Ask the applicant to, yeah, there you
go. Grant awardee. I just lost what I was going to write, Mark. Recognition, right?
Well, I would say a role in, yeah, there you go. That's fine.
Yeah, something. We'll figure out the right words. But you're right. That was a thing, and they had said that they would be happy to do that. They just wanted to have really clear expectations, you know, going in, what it is that the OCRF was looking for.
Kelly, do you know, do other entities require that? Like, do they say if you're going to give a presentation, please put our logo on your presentation? Do other funding agencies, entities do that?
I haven't seen anyone require it. It's just like a best practice. But yeah, I haven't seen anyone specifically count it out, but it might be a really good thing to actually point out again for folks who are just coming into this world too. It's like an etiquette thing. I don't know.
Yeah. And Mark, you still had your hand up. Did you have something else you wanted to add in this space?
No, I don't seem to be able to lower it, but I think my point on that one is to ask the applicant to actually have a press release or announcement or do a tabling event or somehow, you know, communicate their project to others that of course would in part acknowledge OCRF.
Yeah, and Carl, I just will make a note. The only time I've ever been asked to put a logo was from ODFW. So in their R&E Recreation Enhancement Program, they would always provide you with stickers and labels and posters, and anything that you did, they wanted their label on everything. So they were actively partnering like that. But they provided you with all the materials too.
And it looks like we have 2 comments in the chat from Tim and Mike from OWF and OHA saying that they ask for recognition. And OHA publicizes within their organization.
Great.
So it sounds like it's certainly kosher to request that.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Jane, you have your hand up? Jane? Are you stuck?
Sorry, a notification came up and blocked the unmute button.
I hate that when that happens.
So I was thinking about the feedback back to the ODFW staff, but I've heard some feedback from ODFW staff that the feedback might need to also go the other way. Like they've looked at some of the projects we're funding and they're going, well, that's a good project, but it actually isn't as important as these other things. And I keep saying to ODFW staff people, you know, you guys are the ones who are in charge of the conservation strategy. You really need to be beating the bushes out there to make sure that the projects that you think are the most important are do requests for funding. So, you know, this could go a number of directions, and I'm not sure where it fits in this, but as part of the, not the application process, but before the application process, how do potentially other partners help make sure that the grant requests we receive are what they think are really important things to do? The ODF staff definitely needs to do that, but other partners too. If there are things that they're puzzled, like, you know, why aren't these being funded? How do our partners have a way to let us know that? And also just to encourage the potential grantees out there to apply to do something they think is important.
Yeah, really good point, Jane. Tim asked, does OCRF do a press release after every funding round?
I know that we have at times, but I don't think it's consistent. And I think it's a great observation. And that maybe goes in our communication strategy, is that we make sure that we have a press release after every funding round.
Okay, so Jane?
In our grant application, is there an area for the applicants to express how they may or may not be implementing climate resilience? Anything about the climate in their actions, and do we want to emphasize that as a group, or?
There is
That's-
currently the section for drought, and if the project applies to drought, which relates to climate change in Oregon, wildfire, aquatic resilience, but it's a very brief question, mostly like a yes or no, and then short answer.
Okay. Is there something in there? Because I remember reading through those, there was quite a bit of emphasis on diversity, inclusion, equity. Do we have something in there that they're answering
Yes.
that way? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thanks.
I'm just putting a holding place there just so we can have sort of a thorough, are we happy with the way that we're wording everything on the applications to get what we need? Because that could lead to some sort of change. Need a D at the end of that word. So reminding where we are. So this is resources is another area here. So, you know, with your limited resources, are there any goals or actions in that area? So that's committee members, that's people to do other work, partners, anything on resourcing, since nothing came up here as a goal or action.
Is this where it would belong? The like on, you know, continuity of board members or overlap of certain board members, or that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would
I
put
mean, I
it
think
here.
that, yeah, really important. And in fact, I was trying to remember is like, can we technically only serve 2 terms? Or maybe that's just not the fine line in there, but yeah, having overlap, I think, between senior members and new members is important.
Do you mean overlap, meaning if you're leaving the committee, you're still there for a time when the new person's coming on? Is that what you meant by overlap?
I'm just thinking of like my board. There was a point when I first got on, I was running my board and I realized like everyone was up at the same time, you know, like every 2 years. So they had somehow all got on the same schedule. And it was like, oh my gosh, if like my board members all decide to do something else, I'm without a board. And there's no continuity of, you know, our mission and what we've been doing and what we've been working on. So I started staggering people. And I'm assuming this kind of naturally does it since it is governor appointed on this board, but yeah, some sort of just making sure that we are like pragmatically staggering folks and bringing people into the fold.
I think that's already done, in that when our sunset was removed, we had to point people on a rotating basis, and we tried to stagger it. So Reva, I don't think this is an action we take now. I think it's already been done. But Reva, you might look into that, because to be honest, I'm not sure how that all ended up.
So maybe the only other thing is the on-guarding plan for new members. If this is already in place around the continuity and staggering.
Yeah, that may not be. In fact, I don't really, it's not clear to me when my term is up. And I bet
Carl.
it isn't to all of you. And so we need to find that out, Reva. So that's an action to do.
We should probably look that up.
Yeah.
We should probably know that.
That way we could implement like, oh, so-and-so is going to be off. We better start looking for their eco zone replacement.
Well, and knowing that it
Do you
takes a
guys
while to get
know
people,
if you were
you wanna
appointed at
recruit
different times?
We were all, most of us were appointed at the same time, but when our sunset was removed, they assigned each of us a term limit. And I don't remember what that was. So that's actually a really key thing. Why don't you try to track that down, Reva, and figure out where that stands? That's a really good point, because I don't know where we are on that.
I think that's what was triggering my head when we just had to do all of our whatever workday training stuff. I feel like one of the things in there was like, you are on a 2-year term and 4 years each, and then you can't serve anymore. And I was like, oh no, is this whole thing gonna like roll? Is Carl going and everyone's going and roll and like has to restart? So I had a little fear moment.
Okay, good. Anything else around resources? right now. We'll come back to it, so not your last chance. So this area was around focus areas for investment. Again, that doesn't mean this is an area where you want to have priorities and goals, but it's one that came up on the SWOT analysis. So talked about what some of the strengths were, talked about some of the weaknesses, specifically one around the size limit, and are we doing enough on the recreation side? And then I believe a couple things came up down here. I think, there's things around diversity. We don't have a lack of focus, but that's a good thing. But then yet we do have a focus when we have things like the drought money, et cetera. And then there's a broad mandate. So we're doing a lot of stuff here. Any thoughts on this category? From our externals, the main thing that came up, I think you saw, was, there are priority species, there are priority habitats. Are we doing the right things? Are we thinking about big projects, not just small projects? Trying to channel some of the things that we heard from them in case it's useful. Any potential actions in this area?
It seems like part of this conversation before was what's our identity? What's the urgency of our work? How do we know who we are and why are we doing something? And I don't know quite how to articulate it in here, but it's, sort of, we've all heard the term random acts of restoration. How do we move towards, urgent things that are really contributing now?
But how did you describe that, Mark? Random actions of what?
Random acts of restoration.
Oh, so right. I've heard you say that before. So less of that and more of what, Mark?
Kelly's going to answer that part.
Well,
I think it's what's our identity? What's the urgency? I mean, I know it's a conservation strategy, and maybe it goes back to Jane's point. ODF&W needs to tell us what are the top 5 things in the conservation strategy that need attention, and then we have to figure out how to articulate them in a way that creates identity and urgency.
Yeah.
And I see a little bit within ODF&W. It's not for obvious reasons, but they're sort of departmentalized. So you'll get the fisheries person saying this, and you'll get the fur bearer saying this, and you'll get the concert. And so I think even internally, they have trouble extracting out of their silos, well, what would be the 3 things we absolutely have to do?
That's a really good point. And I think ODFW, when we had our little focus group, they felt the same way. Like, how do we better articulate what some of those priorities are? And even felt like the advisory committee probably has a stronger relationship to some parts of the ODFW, but not maybe some of the other parts of the agency. And they have priorities too, right? Carl, your hand was next, I think. And then
yes, that goes back again to the whenever we should be always reminding ourselves that what we do is contingent on the Oregon Conservation Strategy. It's easy for me to forget that, but that is really what's in our legislative. That's what we're supposed to do. So we always have that to fall back on. That is currently being rewritten.
Yes, it is.
And maybe one of the outcomes of that is we would ask them to do exactly what you said, Mark, and identify and try to prioritize things within the conservation strategy to help us make decisions on either where we focus our funding or how we rank projects. Yeah. So Reva, you might communicate with coming up with a lot of things for you to do, Reva, but communicate with whoever is writing up the I've talked to her a couple of times, I can't recall her name, who's responsible for rewriting the conservation strategy, and just express that is that we're we're looking for some direction and guidance in terms of prioritization.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that sounds like a good action. We're trying to implement the OCS. We need to know what to implement.
There's a lot of things in there, so it would be good to prioritize. I think, Jane, you were next.
Well, I just want to say that I think this is one of the most important things we've talked about today. And it's what I was getting at before, but I think we have the potential to really work on this area. Yeah, and I think that's really important to say to ODF staff, hey, tell us what's most important here. But it's also, again, getting the right proposals in. It's, we're just choosing from the proposals we have, and if those aren't the highest priority thing, how do we get the highest priority proposals put before us? Really, really, really important.
Yeah. Maurette?
Well, I was thinking about that back in the day, we asked this exact question. What are the high priority species? This was very much back in the beginning. And the answer was amphibians, reptiles, and bats are places where we have difficulty getting funding. Some places are easier for them to get funding than others. And so it's something that I think we need to continually refresh because things may have changed, but that's the reason we funded so many pond turtle projects the first couple of years. I mean, every project was Western pond turtle, and it was because it was an area that was highly missing from their funding capabilities. And they've also talked about insects, not really being part of their thing, but they recognize their importance. So I think it's something we have to regularly refresh with ODF&W in terms of what's important.
Kelly?
I think this actually could be a perfect opportunity for us to push back on not single species management stuff to the specialists. This happens across ODFW, Forest Service, BLM, all the things. There's a lot of infighting about what's the most important thing. We could even take it so far as to say we're going to focus on the conservation opportunity areas only or something for a year. I mean, they've already, these are areas where they've said focusing the investments in these spots, would really increase likelihood of long-term successes. So there's like a lot of information and data that's gone into the OCS already that I feel like could guide the work that we are prioritizing, or maybe you give it a extra weight or something if it's within a conservation opportunity area, or working in like a strategy habitat, because I think you would affect more species than just, specifically working on coho or a bird or something. Anyway, I'm wondering if there's a place where we have a little bit of push too to say, hey, you guys have already put all the work in, like let's focus in these spots you've said to focus in.
But also on the priority species, not just the priority habitats, but the priority species, because those are in there too. So.
Yeah, no, but I think that's the areas where you'll find the most overlap between more priority species.
So I don't know if I interpreted what you were saying right, Kelly, so help me out, but it was kind of like an OCRF advisory committee point of view, maybe on this is what we're thinking we might focus this round of applications towards, not in isolation from ODF&W, but your own point of view on where you might be able to get some headway.
It's just a thought. I mean, again, the conservation strategy areas to opportunity areas, they're not all over the state, so you're certainly going to leave people out. Yeah. I mean, it would be that situation too. But I'm just trying to think of a way to sort of push them into more agreement as well. Like say, hey, let's look at the conservation opportunity areas. What are our biggest priorities for your staff in these areas? And then be looking for that. But it's just having a little bit of our own clout too, besides just being like, what do you guys think? What do you think? Like,
yeah. Agree. Carl.
As far as actions on those very things, we have a couple of ways to actuate that. And one is how we write up the RFP every time and make it very explicit. We can say whatever. We're focusing this RFP on the species, the species of each ecoregion has specific species. We could do that, or we could focus on the key areas that they identify in the conservation strategy. So we can do that at the front end, and then see and that would try to tailor the applications we got, and then we do that on the back end when we rank them. If we have clearly identified what it is that we're most focused on, then when we go to rank them, we say, well, this is not in a area of what's that? The COAs. It's not in that area, so it's not going to get as high a rank. Or this species is not one of the identified species in the Oregon Conservation Strategy, so it won't get as high a rank. So we don't have to, we can do that. We can set up the frame or mention in this document that we're going to try to prioritize that on an ongoing basis, depending on what's up, because we can do that every time we do an RFP.
Great. Other thoughts in this area? I think a lot of these things get on the less random acts of restoration concept that Mark threw out there at the beginning of the chat. So useful. Anything big missing here?
Carolyn, there was a comment from Kelly. I think it's related to this potential actions about having more focused rounds instead of just having everyone come all the time. I think that's a great idea. Focusing each round towards what you're targeting.
Yes. So I think that kind of goes to what I put there around the tailoring each RFP cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Carl, you still had your hand up. Did you want to add something else?
I don't know how to unraise it.
That's all right. So we have like 6 minutes left. Maybe we could pop over to the final category and just see if we can get some preliminary ideas going so we can work it offline before we get back together in December. So the final category over to the right is all around funding. So what are some of the weaknesses? Well, we don't have long-term funding. Some of our funding has been restrictive. Some things that might influence this are, downturn in state revenue and or just OCRF not being a priority for the state. Some opportunities that were there, although the RAWA is not happening. So that really has become not an opportunity right now, etc. So potential priority goals and actions in the area of funding that you think are within the role of the OCRF?
I think this is where one of the places where we explore our relationship with the Oregon Wildlife Foundation in ways. Are there ways we can raise money for the OCRF beyond state money, say with working with the Wildlife Foundation. This is, again, the model is in other states where there's a 501c3 entity that, for instance, you can go to an outfit like Columbia and say, donate to, charitable donation to the Oregon Wildlife Foundation, and the OCRF will, implement the Oregon Conservation Strategy or something like that. That could be a way. So we need to explore that relationship. Again, we're not going to solve that in this session, but that's something to work on long term.
Mm-hmm. I don't see hands up, so feel free to.
I think similarly, we
Yeah.
need a, a similar core group, whether it's an NGO or individuals that are focused on public funding, state funding, because as we've talked about, it isn't really the role of the advisory committee and we can't lobby in Salem, but we do need a core group of coalition partners. And, OHA has been one of them. Trout Unlimited has been one of them, but I think those partners are just really important in terms of advocating for funding for OCRF, and we need to work with them and solidify, strengthen, and embolden that group.
Well, the Wildlife Coalition that Srishti's involved with has been particularly helpful.
Yeah, good point.
We do have I think it's going to be easy to identify who those players are going to be, but we do need to do that and have a strategy and maybe go to those folks and say, hey, we're tired of this every biennium not knowing exactly what's going to happen, and come up with Srishti, I know, is already working on this stuff, ways to fund us on a more regular, ongoing basis.
Yeah, Carl, and to that, it would, because of how the legislature works and how general funds work, it always ends up being a fight every biennium. But if OCRF's funding can become part of ODF&W's core budget ask, especially that it has been a pop for a couple of rounds now, then there is more certainty. And this is, again, talking about the more unrestricted funding. And short term, I think OCRF at the legislature is still viewed as a vehicle for some of the restricted funding that the legislature would like to direct towards specific conservation issues. But again, keeping the sort of the long-term goal in mind of having more secured, unrestricted funding, there has to be an alternate funding source for ODF&W that can then support OCRF's unrestricted funding.
Jane, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that. I mean, I think the elephant in the room is that we've been really kind of buffeted about by other people's funding priorities, and it's not like we have unfocused funds. We are already focused. We already have, I called it some. The focus is supposed to be the conservation strategy, and we kind of get pulled off of that. So how do we? That's what Srishti was speaking to. So I think that's good. But I think we need to remind people that we already do have a focus, and it doesn't need to be diverted this way and that.
Other thoughts for potential goals or actions in this area of fundraising? We're right at the 4 o'clock hour, but if you have one that you want to make sure gets on there today before we come back again. Okay, go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, that's a lot. My mind is really thinking hard on that. That's a really important thing right there at the end. Maybe we should explore that a little bit more. This funding piece is critical, and we have to have a strategy for it. Although we can't lobby, it may be we're going to end up having to ask these folks to lobby ODF&W to put us in their budget. We've talked to them offline about that and gotten some pushback on that idea that we're just a line item. We're eligible for that now because we've been a POP for 2 years, at least the way I understand it. So a successful POP. So we could be